Submit a question for Eric Nam. I'll be like, this is for your future bae, from your future bae.
It'll be under my like Stan Twitter account name, so it'll be like something really thirsty.
Wait, what's your Stan Twitter account?
I don't.
I think you do. I'll know if you just start sweating. That's how I'll find out the truth.
I've been sweating for the last 20 minutes, even before we started.
You like my little Afro puffs?
You like belong in Clueless.
Yes! Oh my God, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not going to happen, but that was exciting.
Clueless 2.
Yes. The bitches are old.
Serves you right.
Hi, you guys. Welcome to a brand new episode of Black Frasier. It's bloody Tuesday. And I'm excited for this episode. It's a supersized one, so we're
back-to-back supersizes.
I'm not wasting time today, you guys. Yes, I will. Okay, so as always, you're joined by me, Phoebe Lynn Robinson, and my co-producer, my editor, the love of my bloody life,
British bloody Baekoff. Got there before, yeah.
You did. I was going to say something about your bangers and mash.
I know. We don't have time today.
Oh. Should we just get to the episode now then?
Cut.
Guys, okay, we have to discuss a few things. First of all, Baekoff's hair is getting longer by the second.
Literally, as I'm sat here, it's getting longer. You
are giving me peak Michael Douglas in a sexual thriller in the 90s with like the little flip at the end.
I know, does my hair go crazy at the end?
It does.
It's like it curls around like 2 or 3 times.
I'm like, are you Gordon Gekko up in here?
I will say
that's Wall Street reference.
During this quarantine,
yes, mate,
it is becoming dangerously close to a mullet.
No, but it's getting long on the side. So sometimes it's a Michael Douglas situation. Other times it is
Joey Erotica.
What?
The guy from Tiger King.
I haven't watched it.
Oh.
But I was going to say sometimes you give me like 90s grunge, which is also nice. It's just like white male sadness.
Well, I used to be in a metal band. So it's just like going back. Fun fact number 4. Used to be in a metal band.
Okay, it's a scream metal band.
Yeah, screamo band.
Cool. So it's like, is a singer just like, wah, wah, wah.
Oh, you know our songs.
I don't even understand who enjoys that.
Misunderstood teens.
But okay, for real, you guys, we've been together for 3 años. That's 3 years.
Ooh.
Okay, so I went to Spanish in high school. So we've been dating for 3 years.
Yes.
And this hoe, for the longest time, was like, no, I can't play you in my music. No, I can't. I'm too
Well,
embarrassed.
it's because I was in a metal band.
I'm embarrassed. No, I can't. I can't. It's Tuesday. I can't.
It's Friday.
And then you play me like 2 songs. And honestly, one of them sounded like a B-side for Incubus. And I was like, oh, this song is cute.
Right.
And then the other one, I think I like the second one too. But the first one, I was like,
Yeah,
ooh.
We tried.
Yeah.
But we weren't anything to write home about.
Who were some of your influences music-wise? Let me see if I know any of these bands.
Thrice, maybe?
Thrice? No.
Taking Back Sunday.
Thrice sounds like that's what Gwyneth Paltrow says. She doesn't say three. She only says thrice. And you're like, Gwen? Okay. So what's the next band?
Taking Back Sunday.
Taking Back Sunday?
Yeah.
You're taking back Sunday
yes.
From the hands of the fucking ratchet ass nuns who got you up in Sunday school?
Yeah.
Okay. Have not heard of that.
I'm trying to think what other influences. As I Lay Dying.
It's a bit on the nose.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Wait, isn't that the title of like some poem?
Maybe.
Isn't that like Ernie Hemingway?
Ernie.
Yeah, Ernie. As I Lay Dying is an American metalcore band. Oh my God, get over yourself. Oh, it's Faulkner. I knew it was Falks or Ernie Hems. Okay. One of those bros.
I suppose it's a pretty good segue while we're on the topic of music.
I love how you're like, bitch, I'm over this. Listen, guys, we have 1 week to the election and Baekoff is done. He is sick of my bullshit, which is fine because we do have a delightful episode today. It is 2 of my favorite people. And this is the big K-pop episode. I want to do more of these, but I thought this would be like my first entrance into K-pop discussions on a podcast for Black Frasier. And so we have 2 people, okay? Because there's so much to get into.
Yes.
First up is my friend, my coworker, my life coach, my therapist, my, the Bonnie to my Clyde. If you follow me on Instagram pre-COVID, you know that I am talking about my true blue boo, Mai Huynh, who we bought. She's been working for me for 2 years, and we really bonded over being fangirls. I for U2 and her for BTS and Hanson. And, she really introduced me to the world of K-pop.
Same.
Yeah. And so like I learned about Blackpink and what is it, N127?
694.
Yeah.
Sure. What's the other one as well? Extreme Ex
Machina? Just kidding, that's a movie.
No.
You lost it.
I did.
Oh, well, why don't you go Take Back Sunday some more? Wait, what was the name of your band?
Q to Eclipse, but we spelt it CUE instead of like a line.
Q to.
I know. Like I said, we tried.
Were you wearing Vans?
Oh God, yeah. Checkered Vans and skin tight jeans.
Oh my gosh, we've come so long, such a long way. Okay, but back to Mai. So yeah, she really got both Baekoff and I into the world of K-pop, and I've even like watched some concerts online, and I really just enjoyed her passion about it. And so when talking about K-pop, it's taking over the world. It
Big time.
It is sort of, to me, having the similar trajectory that hip hop had when it was coming out and blowing up, and everyone was just like loving it and falling in love with. Even though there was controversy around it, it was just like it just took over.
Yeah.
And so I thought it'd be good to have this podcast and sort of like talk about the world of K-pop, talk about some of like the things that we do know and we don't know. And so Mai is like such a K-pop connoisseur. She knows so much. She's very learned. So I really wanted her to give me sort of her personal perspective on it. Because I think that it's more than just music. It really is life changing for a lot of people, and to see the influence that it's having socially, as well as politically, I think is very powerful. So first up is my conversation with the lovely Mai, and then second is my conversation with K-pop singer.
Superstar.
Yes, Eric Nam, you guys.
Yes.
He is so talented. He's so amazing. If you follow my other podcast that I used to have at WNYC called So Many White Guys, that is where I first talked to him. And it was really good to get his perspective on how the industry is changing, how he views it. And I think overall it's a great episode. I think people are going to be really excited if they haven't listened to a single note, okay, of K-pop, they're going to be like...
Which is hard to believe these days.
Right. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But if you haven't checked out K-pop, I think after this episode, you're going to be like, okay, let me look into these bands and see what's going on and find my crew, figure out my bias.
Figure out your boo.
Figure out your boo and your bias. And if you are into K-pop, I think this is going to be a fun couple of conversations that maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, present different information than what you have been, hearing or reading, like the Hollywood Reporter or Rolling Stone or whatever. Okay. Oh my gosh, you guys, we have merch.
I know. I was just about to remind you.
Do you guys remember that we have merch? Because I forgot. But guess what? I just remembered because I was like, oh yeah, we got some bills to pay. We have gifts, like physical gifts to mail out for the holidays via the USPS.
Well, that's not necessarily what the merch money is going on.
We got to pay for this postage.
Just to be clear.
You're like, this is to fund our podcast.
Yes. It's to keep all three of these lights switched on.
I love how I have all the lights and you have none.
Literally, well, I am the light source. That's the issue.
You are pretty pale. But you guys, we have merch. Go to PhoebeRobinson.com. Get yourself a t-shirt or sweater or jumper.
Oh, yes.
If you're British. Why is it called a jumper?
I don't know.
That's cute. All right. So go over there. We have sizes small to triple XL. PhoebeRobinson.com PhoebeRobinson.com/merch. So let's just kick this bad boy off with my interview with Mai. Hi, Mai.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing Black Frasier. We have so much to get into, but I feel like this particular episode has been long in the making, okay? We're talking about K-pop. You're talking about it. It's going to be documented forever. Like when we all get in Elon Musk's, like, I don't know, astronaut, what is it called? Spaceship?
Mm-hmm.
One of the relics left behind will be this conversation with you about K-pop.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure.
I'll tone it down. But in all seriousness, I am really excited to have this K-pop episode because, as you well know, I really think that, especially in America, people are really much more receptive to K-pop than maybe even like 2 or 3 years ago. And it's really this amazing sort of cultural and global phenomenon that I think is really bringing lots of people together of all ages. And I think a lot of people are sort of like, myself included, sort of like easing their way into K-pop. And so I thought it'd be really good to just sort of have an episode where we talk about the industry, we talk about why it means so much to people, and also especially like the political activeness within the K-pop community and everything that's going on because the world is so stressful right now. And you are the person where I feel like you are the conduit for so many people. Like, you're going to break it down for so many folks who are like not familiar with it, and they're going to like learn so much from Queen Mai.
I should just preface by saying I'm not like a K-pop historian or like a K-pop expert or anything. And I guess anything I speak about is really just coming from like my own experience and like what I've seen and observed. And also a little part of it, like being what I felt as being like an Asian American in the music industry for so long. But, nothing, hopefully everybody can learn a little bit, but like, please do your own research too.
Amen, sister. So for people who are new to sort of following me, Mai is, my like life coach, like my manager, my executive assistant, my sort of like just hype woman, just all things amazing. And we started working together 2 years ago. And if you follow Mai on Instagram, or you follow me on Instagram, you knew that I was very obsessed with Mai. And I was very thirsty. And you were always just sort of like, yeah, like you fine. And that just made me like want to make you like me more. But the reason I bring that up is because I think us meeting and starting to work together was sort of, that was linked to you like sort of easing out of the music industry, which you have worked in for 13 years, and sort of your emotions and like how much you grown during that time. And sort of like K-pop really played a key part in your life, leading up to you leaving the music industry. So I guess a good place to start would be when was the first time you listened to a K-pop song, and how did it sort of like change your DNA? Because I feel like you are so into K-pop and BTS in particular, in the way that I am about you too, where it just is this thing that just has moved your soul for so long. And like, I remember the first time I listened to you two and how it's just like my life has changed, And so I'm curious in terms of K-pop, whether it's BTS or a different group, like what sort of was that moment that made you realize this was a special thing that you're really just going to get into the fandom of it all?
The funny thing is, the first time I ever chatted with you, and I had heard about you before, from getting to know you through Bake Off and stuff. But I think one of the things that I felt like I got along, knew that I would get along with you very well, was how we connected on just like being fangirls. You with you two and me. Honestly, when I first met you, I feel like I was still like a baby army at that time in kind of getting to love BTS as much as I do now. And so that whole process has played like a big part of our relationship. I feel like we kind of understand each other in that way, when I'm like, oh, I have to fly this weekend because I'm going to see BTS into like Chicago, but I'll see you next, weekend for Mo in Nashville or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And
Mo is Michelle Obama, by the way. I love how you casually dropped that.
For those of you who don't know. But I felt like we had that understanding from the beginning. And for me, I've loved all kinds of pop music growing up. And really it was in college, my friends kind of, the inkling, I guess, of getting into K-pop was just more from the business perspective of it, because I was a media major and I went to business school. And I was reading this book for a project that was called Pop Goes Korea by this like music journalist named Mark Russell. And I was just really fascinated by kind of how K-pop was the perfect blend of like art and globalization, and how even now like Korea uses art, whether it be like film and TV and K-dramas and music, as kind of like a soft power to kind of build a global influence. But for me, I was I slowly started getting into second generation K-pop groups just by trying to figure out what they sounded like from reading these articles and reading this book, and kind of got hooked on the pop songs of it. It's just really catchy and fun.
Yeah.
But more with BTS, it was a little bit different because originally that's also kind of what caught my attention, was just kind of the impact that they were slowly having on the music industry. But as you do like the deeper dive, you know how it always starts out with, oh, I just want to figure out what their names are. And then it goes more into, you know, trying to get lyric translations for their songs. And it really, once I got into that, I feel like that's when I became like a fan for life. And it really helped me out of a dark place. Like you had mentioned earlier, I was been touring for so long, like music had lost its magic for me. And I kind of felt numb to anything new, anything that was going on in the world. And like nothing really excited me. But for the first time in many years, and maybe even a decade, I felt like there was something fun again in music. And I found that with BTS. And honestly, I feel like that really kind of saved me emotionally from where I was, which I didn't realize I was depressed when I was coming out of this depression when I met you. And really it was because I found something to be excited about again. And that was, you know, K-pop, BTS, and finding like a community again.
Yeah. And so you feel like some of the depression was just linked to the touring industry because it is such a grind. Like you're working, you know, 16, 18, maybe even 20-hour days. And it's really hard to sort of like take on that pressure. And you're in a different city and you're not as connected with your friends and family as you were if you had like a 9-to-5 job where you sort of like stayed in the same place. Do you think that sort of contributed to your feeling of kind of like I just don't feel great about myself. I feel down. Like I just am not excited about the world.
Yeah, and I guess for me, having a depression as an adult felt different than what it looked like when I was a teenager or like younger. And so I couldn't recognize it. And I never felt like lonely just because I was filling up like every hour. All my days were just work related. And I feel like everybody in their mid-20s, you're part of this grind that you're just trying to get to like the next level. You're trying to work to like prove yourself and all that. And at some point I got to all the levels that I had set for myself, like the goals, and I just still felt kind of hollow and sad, I guess, but without really recognizing that. I just realized like I'd watch these clips of BTS on YouTube and I'd laugh out loud so hard. And I remember just being like, wow, I haven't laughed like that in like 2 or 3 weeks. Like,
Yeah.
and I guess for me also diving into like their lyrics and their music videos and kind of the community, I finally had a place where I felt like I connect to people and could talk to them, not only about BTS, but kind of just all the other aspects that I was going through.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the community aspect in a second, which I think is so incredible. But first, you touched on something earlier about Asian representation in music, and I'm sure, like in the touring world, it is probably pretty low. And I'm also, yeah, no,
I
am I
mean,
wrong?
no, you're definitely not wrong. I used to get like confused with another Vietnamese girl on tour who colored her hair, because we'd like be touring in different cities like a week apart, and they'd be like, "Weren't you just here?" I'm like, "I haven't been here in a year." And then I text her and she'd be like, "Oh yeah, I was just there last week." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
But I also feel like the reason why I'm bringing up Asian representation is I do think that like K-pop, to me, like even though like it's a genre, like I think it's sort of like how like hip hop was like sort of like this genre, and now it just like is fully mainstream and like everyone is listening to it. And I feel like K-pop is having that same trajectory where it's just going to be like this mainstream sort of music, which is huge in a way because, you know, certainly growing up, I listened to a lot of pop music and there were never any Asian pop stars in America that like made it big or were huge or were famous or, you know, or even like the idea of like an Asian male group like being lusted after is something that like that was not part of, you know, my life growing up because like Asian representation was just not there. And so I'm curious as to what is sort of your experience with like being able to find this group and feeling like you're seeing yourself reflected in their music?
I mean, K-pop has been in the US for at least a decade now. I think there was a girl group, a Korean girl group that tried to tour, that opened for the Jonas Brothers like
Oh,
10 years
cool.
ago. But like, yeah, it never really quite made it. Even Psy's like big hit Gangnam Style, like it wasn't really taken very seriously, even though what he was speaking about in the song itself was like a parody about, you know, wealth and like a specific neighborhood in Seoul. But yeah, even at its height, even Psy's song I think only peaked at number 2, and now you have K-pop groups, you know, breaking all these like charts. You know, I think I'll say this because it's most recent. It most recently happened, but you know, BTS just landed their first number 1 song on the Hot 100, and that hasn't been done since I think like the 60s, as like an all Asian group, not like Asian American. But I think it's really amazing to see, because just like seeing Crazy Rich Asians or like Parasite, it's amazing to see a group of people like being able to achieve their dreams in like a Western world and a Western industry that I feel has felt like they've been gatekeepers for a really long time. And I think it really shows how global music has become.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just break down K-pop for people listening to this who are still sort of like, okay, what is the history? Like, what's the origin of this? And like, how has this become this big sort of, mainstream genre now?
Well, Korean popular music and K-pop, the genre, I feel are very different things. But just to give a little bit history, Korean popular music itself has been really political from its inception. Music used to be censored in Korea. So when that was lifted, when, you know, the country moved to democracy, I think it was like the late 80s, early 90s, there was a group, a hip hop group called Sotaji and the Boys, who kind of started to break. They formed like K-pop, the early inception of K-pop, because they had like choreographed dance moves. They had like a stylist. You know, they were also kind of trying to say things in their music as a reflection of what they felt in society at that time. And yeah, it was kind of like the Elvis. They were like the Elvis of their time. They had long hair. There was some music videos they wore like skirts in, and that was really unheard of to do in Korea. But yeah, so the first K-pop group was a hip hop group, actually. And from then, now it's more like stylized, like the genre itself. K-pop genre is more like stylized, you know, the songs are very poppy, catchy, but there's a lot of elements from different types of music. There's EDM, there's R&B, there's hip hop. As a genre, it's just kind of like a melting pot of a lot of sounds.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that I think is so great about this industry is that, I just remember like when I was a kid and growing up, and there was like the whole thing of like the Latin explosion, right? You had like, here was like Ricky Martin, and you're like, oh my gosh, Shakira and J-Lo. And then that, even though I was like a teenager when it was happening, it felt like it was like a trend and it wasn't going to stay. Whereas K-pop now does not feel like a trend, right? It feels like this is something that is going to stay, because I think people, I don't want to say like people fetishize like the Latin explosion, but there was an element of like, oh, this is a cool, fun thing I can try on, but I'm not necessarily taking or viewing this genre or this style of music as legitimate. You know what I mean? Whereas I feel like now, especially with K-pop, people really seeing that like this is not just a way for like Western culture to say like, oh, this is a fad, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing. But that's actually has some legs and it's going to stay here. Do you feel that way too? And what do you think? What do you think are some of the reasons why it's being so wholeheartedly embraced here in America? in a way that it wasn't 10 years ago?
I mean, I still feel like it's still being embraced in America. Like, there's so many things that I could point out that are still happening right now that are really like xenophobic, and like broadcasted on like live podcast and like on the radio still. But I think too, even for the Latin movement, like there's so much that has happened then to now. Like the Latin movement is still strong, but it's still new, even though we've been exposed to it for so long. And I think it takes time, especially for Western audiences, both in the US and in Europe, to kind of be able to be like, well, yeah, I don't understand what they're saying, but maybe this is a good song. I mean, it's just so hard for people to kind of open their
people are being racist. You can say it. Some people are being racist and don't want to embrace music that is coming from people who don't look like them. I mean, that's totally fair to say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even for BTS, like the first time they came to the US was 2015, and it's been like a gradual and a lot of strategy behind their success. Whereas I feel like it's a little easier for a Western artist to just explode and like do crazy numbers out of nowhere. Especially with, you know, YouTube and like social media as it is right now. But I think that we've made steps. And like I said, it's been like a gradual increase with just BTS's discography from 2017. Every year, every time they release something, it gets higher and higher up. But there's a lot of work they've had to do. And it's kind of just symbolic of what you have to do as like a person of color to get recognized anywhere now, especially in America. Like you have to work twice as hard as everybody else to get singular recognition. You know, they the week that they sold or they got number one with Dynamite, they outsold everybody. I think the whole list combined.
Wow.
And they sold, I think, 300,000 units of that single, whereas the week prior to that, one song had sold 125,000. But it's like you have to do everything times 10 in order to make sure like people don't minimize or diminish like your accomplishments. So, and that's been like the whole thing. Like people are like, oh, you know, YouTube numbers are so arbitrary. Like who cares? But we have to hit 100 million views in one day in order for people to be like, okay, you know, this X person could do that. And then kind of prove to them that, you know, we are surpassing even that person's numbers. So it's mostly like proving to ourselves, but you have to kind of speak louder than everybody else in order to get people to pay attention. And I think even with BTS in 2017 at like the American Music Awards, I think if you watch clips of their performance, most of the room did not know who BTS was at the time. But you see everybody freaking out because there's like all these fan chants going on, like the whole arena just erupted up with like people doing their fan chants and people just so excited about this group. And you can see like all these people that like all these industry people just looking around and like just in awe. But it kind of got people talking like, who is this group? And I think we're always trying to do that.
Yeah. And so when you look at, let's just get specific since you brought up that performance with BTS, which I thought it was so amazing. I remember watching that in Portland with Baekoff, I think when we were still long distance dating. But, you know, whenever a group gets that big or, you know, you look at like them or a Cardi B or like an Adele, like something about them just really speaks to and connects with the masses in just a way that maybe you can't even necessarily verbalize. They just have that sort of like je ne sais quoi, ooh wee wee, ooh la la. And so I'm wondering for you, maybe you could sort of start maybe specifically with you, like what about BTS sort of resonates and connects with you so much? And then also sort of looking at like how they have grown in popularity with like each, you know, seeming passing month. Like what do you think about them as really connecting with people at such a large scale like this?
For me, and I think a lot of people will say too, it usually starts with just trying to figure out who they are as individual people. And I think what's helped is that there's just like a large community of like fan translators who translate content not only on YouTube, but like on Twitter. When they tweet, it's mostly in Korean, but you have translators that will tweet right under them and like tell you what they're saying. And I think even from the very beginning in their career, they had like these vlogs, like before they were debuting, of just like checking in, saying hi. And they have thousands of hours worth of content that kind of make you feel like you're getting to know them. And also get to know them in like a more authentic way. And I think as the years progressed, I was always trying to find like, where am I like being fooled here? Yeah. But the more you see and the more you read and the more you hear from other people, I don't know, it's just part of their music. Like, what they talk about in their songs is so much of who they are that you're kind of learning about them as well. And I think that's part of like Western music that really hooked me before as well. Like I really felt that message and it resonated with me. And especially when I was going through depression, they had this whole campaign about like loving yourself and finding out who you really are. And when you hear that message over and over, eventually you really start to understand it. And I think that for me, once I really felt and connected in that way, there was like no going back. And I feel like that's how a lot of others feel too.
Nice. And so what do you think you've learned about yourself, or what do you love more about yourself after really absorbing BTS's message of loving yourself and really connecting?
Well, I guess we touched on this a little bit earlier with like Asian representation, but growing up, who did I have to really look up for in the entertainment industry? I had Trini, the Yellow Ranger, and just these like sidekick parts here and there. But to see people at like the forefront of this industry, it kind of made me really proud to be Asian. And as a kid growing up in like a small town, it's not really small, but it's like a smallish town in Texas. And like growing up in like a white community, I always felt like I had to shy away or be ashamed, or was kind of like ashamed about being Asian. And now to see all these other cultures embrace BTS because they're Asian, it really helped me to be proud of who I was. And when you go to a show, it's not just, seeing other Asian faces. You see Latino faces, you see Black faces, you see just like, honestly, like a rainbow of people at these shows. And it makes you feel just connected, especially going to a stadium. And you just see the diversity in the audience, not just in nationalities, but like in age as well. And there's like families and there's men and there's whole like generations like that go to shows together. Like I've been seated next to a whole family before.
That's cute.
So it's really, I don't know, I feel like BTS has been broad enough where they've been able to connect people of all ages, all races. And I have never really felt there's been like a language barrier. I feel like music has really truly transcended like everything.
Yeah. And so this is a tough question, but for BTS, there's 7 members. Your bias is RM. Yes?
I used to say no, and my friends would look at me like, girl, you do have a bias. And I could turn my screen slightly to the right and show you my 80 Koya plushies. But
do you want to do that?
No.
Let's see it.
I'll turn it. You can edit that out. Wait, that's not the right. Tell me when I reach the right window.
Yes, and look at that view. Oh my gosh, Nancy Meyer's wishes. Okay, but yeah, that's a lot of plushies.
That's just half of them. I'm sure.
Yeah, move your mic back.
Yeah, I can't wait to show you them in person, all of them.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
So RM is main Bay. Yes.
Yes. But honestly, I really love BTS, all 7 of them.
Yeah.
My glasses are starting to fog up by this question, so I just need to.
So who would you be the biggest thought for? Would it be for RM? Would it be for someone else?
Literally anyone. If one of them were to appear down the street, I would definitely get run over by a car to like chase after them, but in a calm way, not in like a psycho way, but in like.
That's very cute. I love that.
I think just in general, they're all really great ambassadors for art.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've learned so much from them, just by what they've exposed me to. Like RM's always tweeting about like the art galleries and stuff that he goes to and the artists, like Korean artists that he's into. And they're really opening kind of a new world for the fans that listen to their music also, just like books and like paintings and other I don't know, other art, all the arts.
Yeah. And so one of the other things I want to talk to you about is, I think not only the community itself, but also the group, like in terms of being politically active and being outspoken. Like I feel it's a lot of times, especially in the world of pop music, right? You sort of want to establish yourself as like this grand sort of talent before you will be politically outspoken. If you look at like the Beyoncés or the Taylor Swifts, before you don't want to say anything political, you just want to be like relatable to everyone. But I feel like as BTS has been making sort of their ascension, they've been outspoken, which I think is really sort of special and powerful. And I think the K-pop community as well has been that way. Whereas you look at that rally that Donald Trump wanted to have, and like all the tickets were bought by K-pop fans, so like there was like no one at the rally, which I thought was amazing. So I really like to hear you speak about sort of the political activism that happens within the K-pop community and how maybe you see BTS as leaders of that. Are other groups doing this as well? Is this encouraged by like, the K-pop industry at large should be this outspoken? Like if you could talk about that, that would be great.
I mean, I'll only speak to BTS because I feel like I know them the best. I mean, not personally, but just like the fandom. BTS as a group, they have always been outspoken. And I think people have just learned about it now, but them as a group, they started out as a hip hop group, and all their music since the beginning of BTS has had like a message behind it. And it's been socially conscious music is what I like to, like how I like to explain, I guess, in that they've always, through their lyrics, even if it's a pop song, kind of analyzed what's happening around them, in the government, culturally. So I don't think it's a surprise that, BTS fans are politically active, especially since most of us are like pretty well versed in social media and organizing on like Twitter, on Instagram and stuff. Like whenever there is a single release or an album release, you have to be quick. And so I think we've had that practice to kind of be able to organize ourselves in a really fast and efficient manner. And that's played a part, I guess, as part of this political activism. But I also really feel like we're just all music fans, but we are a diverse group of music fans. And of course, the things that will affect us in our real life will also kind of play out as in our fandom. I think Baekoff, you can definitely pause this.
Wait, why did you pause? Because you were going to say his real name?
I was going to say his real name, but I also forgot like the second part of your question.
So the other part of the question is like sort of this outspokenness and this political activism. Is this encouraged by the K-pop community? Like, are execs excited about this, or do they want the acts to really sort of be less outspoken?
I think traditionally a lot of other K-pop idols haven't had that much freedom in how they are able to communicate or express themselves. But why I like BTS so much is because from the beginning they were able to speak their minds and say what they wanted to say, whether it be musically or like even in interviews. I don't feel like they've been like as boxed in with what they want to say since even as a young group, they haven't shied away from any kind of controversy. But I think too, like a significant percentage of like K-pop fans, you know, are Black, are Latinx, are LGBTQ, and it's really just about amplifying the issues that mean most to us. And I think as a fandom, we're a reflection of BTS. They encourage us to speak out, and they haven't been immune to criticisms. And there's so many things I could point out, but I feel like what's made it different is like their company and themselves too have kind of come out and even apologized for being culturally insensitive, not just, you know, with like Western cultures, but, you know, there's high tension sometimes between like Korea and Japan. And sometimes some of the things that they've done in the past have been seen as like culturally insensitive. And I think it's the same with a lot of other K-pop idols and groups and stuff too, is that I think what we've seen as groups get more popular and there's like more money, there's like definitely a fine line, I think, between like cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation. And I think that when it's used, like certain parts of culture are used as like an aesthetic, that's definitely cultural appropriation. But if there's like an understanding and authenticity that works, that's more cultural appreciation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as a fandom, K-pop fans have always been involved culturally, politically. And so I wasn't surprised when I saw in the news. It's just now people are kind of hearing about it. But I think, especially in the BTS fandom, we've been raising monies for charities, you know, for years. Yeah. We've done over like 600. I say this we. As a group, as a fandom, like we do charity donations and activities for like the members' birthdays. And so over the years, that's just added up. You know, Jimin and J-Hope are really these are BTS members. They really involved in children's charities and organizations. So we've kind of followed suit with helping out, donating desks or like school supplies or like funding low income students and families to be able to like continue and further education. And like every year, every couple, you know, months, I feel like there's like a new organization that Armies helps to support. And that's like a year round thing. And so I think like when BTS specifically spoke out about the Black Lives Movement, it really propelled people. Like other groups, other K-pop groups felt like, okay, it's okay for us to speak about this. And even in the fandom, like we already donated close to $200,000 to the Black Lives Movement as individuals. But as soon as we saw them donate, we were like, we gotta like ramp this up. Let's match. I honestly did not think that we'd be able to match $1 million in 24 hours, but we did. And that's incredible. I think that's just part of being part of the BTS fandom is like they're always encouraging us to do more and to do good. And it sounds silly, but so we just, I believe. It's hard to say, but I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I feel like now is a time where I feel like the most outspoken about things, because they've given me kind of the tools to kind of examine all the things inside of me, to know myself better so that I can speak out to the things that are important to me.
Oh, that's so great, Mai. So I think in closing, what I would like to ask you, first of all, this has been a great primer on K-pop stuff. If there's anything you think that we've missed, let me know. But I think that you really painted like sort of like, this is like, it's just such a world of positivity. And I think that that's so important right now, because the world is really sort of like sad, and like I have my low days. I'm sure everyone else listening has their low days as well. And so I guess my final question is, if you could talk to BTS right now, what would you say to them so they can understand how much they mean to you and sort of the impact they've had on your evolution?
This is so hard. Sometimes, honestly, I think about what I would say if I could ever meet them or get a chance to talk to them, and I feel like emotional just thinking about it.
Aww.
But I just want to say, thank you for transforming my life, for introducing me to a group of people that I feel will be lifelong friends, introducing me to a community that is so diverse and so giving and just so open and non-judgmental. And thank you for giving me music that I can look back on and reflect on and see like my own personal struggles in, because that's a piece of art that I can look back on in 30 years from now and reflect on and still find meaning in. And I think that's so important. So thank you for making the art that you do the way you want to do it.
And also, first of all, that's very sweet. I almost teared up. And also, RM, you need to take my girl out on a date. She's not going to shoot her shot, so I'm shooting it for her. Take Mai out. That's my call to action for anyone listening to this. We got to get Mai and RM on a romantic AF date. He needs to bring flowers. If he wants to bring a corsage, he can.
I have a bonsai now because of him, so, we can admire that. I'll learn how to ride a bike so we can go around the Han River. I'll be outdoorsy.
So, RM, if you're listening, you better snatch Mai up before somebody else does.
Anybody else in BTS, too.
Yes. Don't be exclusive yet. They gotta prove to you that they are worthy of you. Well, Mai, this has been such a great conversation, and I just want to say, like, even in the 2 years that I've known you, like, I feel like you have grown so much, and you just blossomed into, like, you were already an amazing person that I was obsessed with from day one, but you just have, I just, like, see your inner strength so much, and I see, like, how much heart you have and how much compassion you have, and, like, just, like, you're so encouraging of so many people, and you're so smart, and, like, I can totally see how you're so much more outspoken, and, like, just even in your social media, which I know some people could be like, yeah, is that, like, enough? But I feel like you posting links and information and sharing your thoughts and your hearts with people is, like, encouraging other people to be like, oh yeah, like, maybe I don't have, like, a ton of money right now, but I can, like, donate $20 to Black Lives Matter, and that, like, still helps and counts. And so I think, like, you are paying it forward. Like, BTS was sort of this thing that, like, awakened something in you, and I think you paying it forward to others is going to awaken in them, like, oh, if Mai can do it, so can I. So it's really amazing to see.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Of course. Babe, isn't Mai the cutest?
Her passion for BTS.
Oh my gosh.
One, I don't think I'll ever understand. And two, 80 plushies.
I know. I'm
80. She did say 80, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
We could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's up there.
Is up there.
Yeah. But you know what? You've never loved anything as much as she loves BTS?
I love you.
Mm.
But I've never been a fan girl. No.
Right. You kept it cool.
Yeah, I think.
You made me fly to you for our first date.
Facts.
You were like, bitch, get on Alaska Airlines.
Did you fly Alaska?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it was like a last minute trip.
A last minute tally ho.
Yeah, it's a last minute tally ho around the country to meet you in Portland. And guess what? It's worked out.
Yeah.
So I ain't complaining. Okay, let's get to our next.
Let's keep it rolling.
Interview with Mr. Eric. No.
Let's get it.
Yes. Hi, Eric.
Why, hello there. How are you?
I can't believe it's been 6 months. No, it's been 6 months. Yes, since we had
It has been 6 months.
A for real conversation.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Wow.
Time flies when you're stuck in places and you can't do anything, right?
So you've been in Korea since we last talked.
I have been in Korea. I have put out a new album. I have been podcasting. I've been making content because that's what we do.
Your fans want it. They desire
I hope they
it.
enjoy it. I hope so. So thank you, fans. How are you though?
I'm okay. You know, I'm trying to thrive during the core. You know, being inside an apartment can be cabin fevery, but I'm happy that no one has corona. So I'm that I know. So I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Okay. Before we start this episode, which is going to be such a great episode, I feel like we just go back and forth being on each other's podcast. I need to talk to you about your skin because it is looking quite. What if I was like, because it looks like shit? No, it looks amazing.
Oh, I thank you. Thank you so much.
Your skin looks so good, and I need to know all the secrets because mine is kind of a up and down journey.
Yeah, you look great, first of all. So, I mean, I don't know what more you need to do, but
can I tell you this? This is gonna sound really trifling. That you can say like your actual like content. So for the podcast, I use Zoom, and then we check the option where it makes your skin look flawless. If you can Facetune and Zoom, so that's what I do.
Let me tell you a secret. So do I. Yo, Phoebe, everybody's trying to look good. I know we're in quarantine, but we still gotta look presentable to people. And I don't trust just my bare face to look good. So I don't know if it's on right now, but if it isn't, it should be. I don't know. I hope y'all do a lot of post work on this stuff, but I feel you completely.
So what do you do? Like, are you a big like serums person, moisturizer? Like, what's your go-to thing?
Oh man. So what do I do? So there's like this long video that I did with, I think Vanity Fair, me breaking down my skincare routine, but it's changed since. So here's the latest update. Okay. So I do I just put a lot of stuff on my face and I make sure I take it all off at the end. It's very simple, but one thing that I do is, like a coconut oil cleanse and then a foam cleanse, coconut water. So it gets all the bad stuff out. And then I do like a bunch of serums. Korea has like really good skincare, like a lot of K-beauty stuff. And it just pops up everywhere. And I don't even know exactly what I'm buying these days, but I was like, you know what? It's so cheap, but maybe it's the packaging. It looks organic and healthy. So I'll try it. So recently I'm doing this makes me sound crazy, but I'm doing this like I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's like hyaluronic acid serum with honeybee propolis serum and vitamin C serum. I'm just like trying it all. I was like, I'm in quarantine. We're locked down kind of. You might as well. And that's why I look so glowingly glowing.
You
That's it.
do. You look like you're
Thank
ready to
you.
win an Oscar. I'm like, oh my gosh.
You know what? I wish, but thank you.
No, but I'm so glad that you're able to do this and take time out of your busy schedule because you are working nonstop. And this is for Black Frasier, our first big K-pop episode. And
Yes.
I'm so excited about it. And, I've learned more and more about K-pop because of you and my beloved Mai. She is like, K-pop queen. She like knows it all.
Mhm.
And I wanted to have like a conversation about it because I feel like and I was saying this to Mai, like I feel like how hip hop was maybe like 10 years ago when it really just became global and celebrating this way. I
Uh-huh.
feel like that is truly what's happening with K-pop. And I think that that's so interesting, fascinating, amazing, and also the unexpected sort of political activism that's within the K-pop community, I think is really
Yeah.
inspiring. And so I just wanted to sort of like talk to you because I feel what you've done with your career has been so amazing and so incredible. And I feel like there's still so much unknown about K-pop for like the average sort of person in America that I thought it'd be good to
Right.
sort of like have this conversation with you and kind of like talk about your journey. And so I guess my first question is, did you seeing where K-pop is now and seeing how accepted you guys are becoming and, especially in America in a way that just America was just not receptive to non like English language music. Like you had like this sort of Latin explosion when I was a teenager, but that was kind of lasted for like 2 minutes and then it was kind of done. And this feels like this has like like the legs are much stronger this time around for you guys.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, did you ever think that K-pop would sort of take over in the way that it has? Or is this also sort of like a surprising moment for you as well?
I think it's surprising for everybody. I think
Mhm.
probably in growing up as a kid in the States, it was a big deal when I saw certain Korean faces make it mainstream. Like there
Yeah.
was one year where there's this guy Rain P. He was like one of Time's most influential, and like there would be small, subtle forays into the American market because they're like, oh, we made it in Asia, we made it in Korea or Japan or China. Let's try the U.S. And every time and time again, it would just fizzle out. Like
Mhm.
something wouldn't connect. But I think having watched that arc, I always thought there was something very positive to be said about the quality of production that kept coming out. Where
Mhm.
if they just keep trying, something has to take off at a certain point. I didn't think it would get to the point where BTS and Blackpink and these groups are at the top of Billboard. Um,
Yeah.
like singing in English like it's, their native tongue. But it's super exciting to see. I did not really expect it to be to this caliber, but I'm really excited to see that it's getting there. But I think it's also just the beginning, not just for K-pop, but just for representation in general. Because I think of K-pop as a key in unlocking representation for people who look like me, Asian
Mhm.
Americans.
And why do you feel like K-pop is the key for sort of unlocking that representation? Like what do you think is coming behind the music?
I think it's, unfortunately or fortunately, a big part of the way anything works is money.
Mhm.
It's business. It's financially driven. And I think for a lot of companies, they see K-pop as a genre where people love it. They're engaged. They're hyper interactive with the content that is put out. And, you know, K-pop still sells millions and millions of physical album copies. Like I don't think anybody is selling physical copies these days. K-pop is selling physical copies. And for labels and for music executives, that's a big deal. It is kind of a taste of the older days before streaming and downloads killed off an entire revenue stream. And so when people look at K-pop, it's a form of entertainment that is more easily monetizable. And that's, I think, unfortunately, one of the bigger thing that's driving it. Just like sheer numbers, followers, impressions, because everything outside of physical sales, when you live digitally, you need ad impressions and you need reach and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a double-edged sword where a lot of it is financially driven, but at the same time, it's also kind of to say, well, goes to prove that people don't have an aversion to people who look like us. Like, people will still listen to our music. They love us. They think we're hot, cute, sexy, whatever adjective you want to put in there. And we're just like everybody else. We're just like the mainstream. And I think for that reason, K-pop is proving out that point, and it plays a very crucial role in furthering, representation in that way.
Yeah. So
did that make sense? Did I just talk in a circle?
No, that was
great.
so good. Enough.
Yes.
Come on. And so, you just put out an album recently, what, like a month ago? Not even?
End of July. Yeah.
Yeah.
Early
You
August,
put out
something like
an album during the core, which, and I watched the live stream and I was like, this
thank
man
you.
does not stop working. And so I'm curious as to how you feel like your career has sort of morphed during this sort of like appreciation for people who look like you, who are singing pop music.
Yeah. I think first, it's really exciting in the sense that more people will have a conversation, more journalists or more, TV shows or whatever. They're willing to have a conversation about K-pop or who I am and where I come from. So I think that's great. I think what's the frustrating part is that it kind of seems to end there for now, where it's tell us just about K-pop and what it is, and then BTS, and that's about it. And so my point whenever I go into conversations is like, K-pop is strong not only because of BTS, but because of so many of the different artists and musicians and cultural things that also influence BTS and that surround BTS. BTS is one group out of hundreds of amazing, incredible artists. And again, I'm sure for people who are listening, like, or who are fans of BTS or myself, they know that like we've been friends since they debuted, since from the very beginning. So all this comes from a place of respect and admiration and love. But there's so much more in the market for diversity in terms of music style, in terms of just, gender or just everything. It runs the gamut of things. And so I would love for people to be able to, yes, let's start at BTS, but how can we go further? How do we go deeper into really appreciating so much of the culture that is out there, that is really making waves in its own right, including myself. And I think that's kind of where we are at right now. But it is really exciting to see kind of doors not swing open, but it's like a swinging back and forth door. One of those like pivot doors that you see at a restaurant where the the waiters go into the kitchen.
So what do you feel like you want to be in the conversation about K-pop and pop music in general, outside of just BTS and Blackpink and sort of things that people have been just sort of touching on currently?
I think this is going to take time, and I know it's going to take time, but it would be really cool to be able to get K-pop and K-pop artists to a place where we're just everyday household names, And it's not a question of, I think even like when you look at digital content right now, a lot of it was like in Korea or when you're in the States, or this kind of, in a way, it's a way to make it feel like they're more relatable or we're more relatable, but also foreign at the same time. Yeah. But to be able to dive into a place where it's just like any other interview, we're treated like anybody else. We have the same ability and capability and opportunities to be represented, I think that would be a really cool place to get to. I don't know what that looks like exactly. I really don't. But just, you get that sense. You're like, okay, we're getting there. Sometimes we feel the optimism and the good things coming, and just to be able to get to that place at some point, I think could be really cool. I don't know. I'd say this too. When it comes to like the music side, I think a lot of companies or brands or labels or whatever, because they see how astronomical BTS or Blackpink are, that is like their standard for K-pop. When it comes to what or how something performs. And in a way, if we are below that, there's like a sense of, yeah, but you're K-pop, so like where are the huge numbers? I was like, okay, again, there's so much more to this than just those two groups. And so I think just like a general education process that is happening now, that will continue to happen. And I think, again, with those 2 or 3 groups at the top, things trickle down, they funnel down, people get deeper into the whole of what K-pop is. And we're adding fans to the, I guess, community every day, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, it's what you touched on about this sort of like exceptionalism. Like, if you don't have these astronomical numbers, then you're not maybe viewed, or your work isn't as appreciated. Which I think is something not only in K-pop, but just being a person of color. That's what you have to sort of deal with. Like, if you're not extraordinary, then you're worthless. You know what I mean? In a way. Like mediocrity isn't allowed, or just being good at something isn't allowed. You have to be like the best ever.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, like, do you ever feel that sort of pressure? Like, when you go into the studio and you're working on your albums, do you ever feel that like, oh my God, I got to live up to this, and this? Or are you able to get in a space where you can really enjoy what you're creating, enjoy the fans that you have, and enjoy the music that is resonating with people all over the world?
I think I'm more of the latter, where I think I play in a different realm, in the sense that I am a solo artist. You look at K-pop, there are not many solo artists, and the ones that do exist, they are, because I personally think it's like when you're in a group, it just sells better. There's a lot of what I think really drives the K-pop content is a synergy and a chemistry between the group members off camera. So a lot of like the really great pieces of content that do well are like just the banter between members and like how people kind of interact with each other. And so a lot of the solo artists that exist now are individual members from a group that have kind of put out a solo project. There are not many just solo female or male artists these days. And for me, I started it when I was like 23, and that was considered too old in Korea to be a part of a group.
Oh, wow.
So they're like, you're too old. You have to have started like at least 5 years ago, so that we could not only train you, but we could kind of get as much as we can out of you when you're young. It's pretty much like the general industry way of, saying that. I don't know where I was going with this. This is what happens when I have deep conversations. I go in circles.
This is so fascinating. I love hearing about it.
What was the question? What was the original question?
It's more about like, do you feel that sort of pressure of having to be exceptional or extraordinary?
Right. So, okay. So I think a lot of, what K-pop is known for are for these groups, because they could do these big choreography moments, and really share parts. And the great thing about being in a group is your members can cover up any flaws or things like you cannot do well. So if I'm not the best dancer, I'm going to have a member next to me that's going to take the crazy backflip, jump step, whatever. And if I'm not that funny on TV, I have a member that's going to go on TV. And then as a group, it reduces the risk of somebody not being able to perform well. So for me, I think for a long time, I had tried to pursue, or I wanted to pursue, this place where I could follow all these big groups. So for a few years, I literally did, and I would say this openly, I was like, I'm exhausted because, well, you have 5 people to split up radio, TV, acting, hosting, whatever. I have to do all those on my own and then think of putting together an album.
Yeah.
So I had years of doing that where I got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore because I physically am going to just burn out. So I think naturally I got to a place where, Eric, like, first of all, take care of your health. Second, it's just, I'm not geared to be an idol in that sense. So what can I control? What can I focus on? What can I be good at and exceptional at on my own? And that would be creating music that was distinct to who I am. So that's where I go in and I just kind of do whatever I want and I have fun with it. It's even within that, there's a lot of back and forth, push and pull with the label in terms of, is this too American? Is this too Western? Is this too Eric Nam? We need more ballads because those are proven to have performed better in Korea in general. But for me, on the flip side, that's the only way that I know to be different and to stand out musically.
Yeah.
And that's kind of always been the fight. But now I'm at a point where like that's like the one thing that I really, really enjoy and I love and I feel like I can do and express myself in whatever creative experimental way that I would like. And that's kind of the fun part.
Yeah, so I whenever we talk, we always sort of like compare our workaholism, if you want. We always talk about like all the things that we have going on. And I know that like so often the media, especially over here in the States, it's like, oh, you know, K-pop just sort of like rides their artists until like the wheels fall off and like they don't take care of their art and like everyone's like exhausted and like can't make it through. Do you think that that is like sort of fair and accurate? Or do you feel like, well, isn't the whole music industry, no matter the genre, kind of like that? Or do you think K-pop is really sort of pushing artists to their limit?
I think if you're in entertainment, you are by definition a workaholic. We work insane hours, not only just in terms of duration, but just like wake up, call times, whatever. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a trait of the job. I think in Korea though, artists are pushed very hard. And it's just not necessarily just like the labels that do it. It's just the system, the entertainment system. Because I think Korean entertainment, they try to be as efficient as possible, which also leads to deep inefficiencies.
Yeah.
So for example, there are daily music shows in Korea. Every single day of the week, there is a live music broadcast where we will go, we will sing and perform for 3 minutes. And that's it. But in order to be on TV for those 3 minutes, usually, you know, in time of COVID, it's changed a little bit. But we will be there sometimes at 6 or 7 a.m. to do a dry rehearsal. Then we'll come back at 1 p.m. for a camera rehearsal. And then we'll go on live at 5 or 6 p.m. So by the time we're done, it's 7 or 8 p.m. So it's more than a 12-hour affair where oftentimes you may just be stuck there because they don't really let you know the schedule ahead of time either. They let you know the day of. You have to physically get there and see what order you are. And so it's kind of ingrained into this system where we don't want it to be that way, but the powers that be, aka at this point, in this regard, the TV network or that show, that's how they run their ship. So I'm sure like, even for my managers or anybody, they're like, we'd love for you to just be efficient with your time and whatever. I'm at a point where I've been in the industry for almost 10 years that I'm generally going to be at the later point, and I kind of try to show up a little bit later, but even then it's like, let's be there at 8 just in case. And it's just really, it's that kind of cycle for a lot of these shows that make it really exhausting. But that's slowly starting to change. I think people are trying to, you know, be a little more considerate of people's times
Yeah.
in that way. But going back to just like the overall entertainment thing, like I think when I talk to a lot of Western media, they're like, K-pop is like cruel to their artists, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. I think there are cases where obviously there have been mismanaged cases, cases where people have been mistreated. But I don't think, again, that is because it's K-pop. I think that's any industry, any job, you're going to have cases of neglect or abuse or whatever. Not justifying it, not saying it's okay, but that's just kind of the way it is. K-pop just happens to be such a visible piece of culture that it's easy and it's interesting for people to dive into it. Now, on the flip side, I think artists and trainees work really hard also because it is so competitive. It is unbelievably highly competitive. Becoming a K-pop singer up until maybe a year or two ago was the most desired job by young kids, the number one most desired job in the entire country. Right now, it's like YouTuber, right? So which is, a sign of the times, but every single kid in this nation wanted to become a singer or a dancer or an actor. So when you have that much competition, it's ingrained in the culture for people to be working above and beyond overtime to try to make it. And I think this is not also just in K-pop. If you look at the education system here, it's really sad. Like kids will get up. I remember my cousin, he'd get up at 6 or 7 a.m., would not see him till past midnight, go to school. And then in Korea, in order to stay ahead, you have to go to the academies. They're called hagwons. So as soon as school ends, you're going through different academies, be it dance or extracurriculars, but a lot of them are literally sitting in academies getting supplemental work so that they can pass tests and try to outperform. Because everything in Korea and most of Asia, it's ranked. You know exactly who's number one, you know exactly who's number two, and that determines your future. So this hyper-competitive kind of ranking system across the culture bleeds into K-pop as well. So I get it. I understand why people think that. And people have approached me so many times, like, let's talk about the dark side of K-pop and the underbelly. I was like, yeah, like it's not pretty at times, but that's because it's like any other job. Like people in Korea, I think there was a study a few years ago. I think Korea was the most inefficient or underproductive when it came to like hours worked in comparison to output of OECD nations. Because this also bleeds into the cultural thing of like, if your boss is at the office, anybody below you is not going to leave. People are just kind of sitting there. Like, it's just a very cultural thing. So all to say, it's a complicated thing, but I do think it comes from a huge supply of people wanting to make it really, really big and working really hard, and a demand for excellence when it comes to what people are putting out.
Yeah, and I feel like knowing that so many people want to have what you have, like that, I feel like that has to be like a little bit stressful because it's like you have to, you would be, I don't know, I would say you would be lying if you didn't at least look over your shoulder every once in a while just to see like who's around and what's happening when, everyone wants to have this dream that were able to achieve. And so I'm wondering, like, in K-pop, like, what do people do? Like, obviously not everyone's getting into a group. So like, what do people do when they go to these academies, they try to form these groups and it doesn't work out? They just go back and have like a regular life? Like, have they missed out on like going to college? Like, what does that look like for people?
Obviously I think it really varies for everybody, but I've seen people who have tried it for years and years and it just doesn't work out, and they end up working at like a convenience store to get by, or some people, if they're I think on the good side, they become like a vocal trainer because there's an entire new generation of people who want to become an idol too. So a dance trainer or a vocal trainer, or they become a backup dancer. But it is tough. Like I really don't know what a lot of people end up doing. There are people around me where I kind of want to just be like, I love you as a friend and as a brother, but I really think you should kind of put up your, what is it, like your shoes or whatever you call it, that saying, I don't even know.
Yeah. Hang it
Um,
up.
yeah, hang it up. Just because it's like, I know, like I've been through it. It's so hard to get to this place. Like it still baffles me that I am in the position that I am in.
Yeah.
And to see where certain people are, I'm like, dude, you have so much more to go. And it's just so hard. And then you
Yeah.
ask yourself, like, is it worth it? Is it really worth it because if you make it great, like it's worth it. Like you're pursuing a dream, you're living the life, you're living the dream. But in the case you don't, I'm a very practical person in many ways.
Mm.
If you don't, like, what are you gonna do? Like I've had so
Yeah.
many of these conversations, and it's, but at the end of the day, it's their choice, it's their decision, and I have to respect that. I have to just be a friend and be like, okay, well, let me know if I can help, but good luck.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way it is.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think that really sort of draws me towards K-pop and really makes me have this huge appreciation for it is I just think that the not like how wide reaching the fan base is, but how sort of politically active they are in a
Mm.
way that I think is it's so cool. Like just even seeing here when Trump had that rally, and so like all these K-pop fans like bought tickets, so like the arena was
Yeah.
like mostly empty, and seeing that sort of like kind of, I know for me I was like, oh, I didn't expect that any sort of like genre of music to have their fans sort of kind of like mobilize in that way to really be
Yeah.
politically active. And I'm wondering like, A, what do you think of that? B, has that kind of always been how K-pop fans are? And does that sort of inspire you in any way to like maybe you want to be more vocal than you might have been, I don't know, like 5 years ago about certain
Mhm.
social issues?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think it's incredible. I think it's
Mhm.
great. And I think I think K-pop has a very tight-knit community. There are so many people who are into it, but it also feels in many ways very intimate.
Mhm.
Because I don't know. I think it's changed over the past few years, but like when I first got into it, it was like if you're in K-pop, you are standing for, like, it's like always the underdog. You're rooting for the
Mhm.
underdog. We've always been underdogs. And because of that, I think generally the people who are in K-pop are just good people. They're just like, they're not
Yeah.
malicious. They just like, we like what we like, and this is what it is, and we're very proud of our artists, and that's been incredible to see. And to see that grow has been really great. When it comes to the political activism, I don't know who started it, but I think it's
Mhm.
amazing because K-pop fans, in many ways, run so many parts of the internet, and when they
Mm.
come together and are able to use it for what I think is a positive statement and change, it it really speaks volumes to how big we've gotten, but also just like the good that people can do when they kind of work together. Um, I think when it comes to myself personally, um, I've always been a very, I don't want to say vocal, but like I've always
Mhm.
had my stances.
Yeah.
Um, and it's always been very taboo to speak on politics and social issues. But when I first started in Korea and, even tracking back to like the earliest interviews that I did, it was like, why do you want to become a celebrity or a singer? And it was twofold. It was like, one, I love music and I want to pursue a dream. Two is like, I want to get to a point where I can use my platform for social impact and good. At that point, I was thinking just like on the ground humanitarian work, and
Mhm.
it is something that I've been very active with even till like a week ago. I was doing stuff with different organizations, but politically, it's always been very tricky. Like it's always been a fine line, and it's this current climate in which I'm trying to push the boundaries of my involvement and my activism. And it's very interesting to see the different responses that I get from the internet.
Ooh, do tell.
Yeah, it's like very weird. So I don't know. I have a question for you though. Like, because I'm not in the States right now, and I maybe just be missing a lot of like the social posting and like the activism part. What have you seen when it comes to public figures or celebrities making statements on politics these days? Is it taboo? Is it weird? Are people being shy? Like, what's going on?
I mean, I feel like so many people are speaking out. The reception, I think, is varied. There's certainly, I think, a fatigue with some people hearing celebs telling them to vote. They're kind of like, you're out of touch, you're rich, you're like COVID hasn't affected you, like I don't want your opinion. But I think it's also been good to sort of, you have these organizations like, Michelle Obama's like when we all vote.org, and you have these other groups that are really sort of speaking to young people and trying to find ways to connect with them in a real way, because I think, the two-party system here is so deeply flawed. And I think a lot of people feel disillusioned by that. So I think it's a mix, but I think it is sort of, there's almost kind of this attitude that if you're not being outspoken politically, what are you doing? Because there's so much at stake with this being an election year. With the number of COVID deaths, I think it's now over 200,000 currently in the States. There's sort of this kind of like, you can't just like not get involved. Like you have to do something. So it's kind of, I will say, I don't know if exciting is the right word, but it's really, it's good to know that people aren't just rolling over and lying down. Like no matter how sort of stressful things are and depressing things are, people are finding ways to show up, whether it's through, early voting or, protesting or getting involved in local elections and running in a way that they never decide before to run for a local office. So I think that that's been inspiring, but there's a lot of tension. Like, especially when I go online, there's a lot of anger.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So like, do you feel like people are sort of trying to follow your every word and looking to like engage in an argument or discussion? Like what is sort of the general feedback that you're getting right now?
I have been very vocal socially on like voting, and also just a lot of Asian American issues with Black Lives Matter, just here and there, just wherever I think is something that needs to be amplified. I have been very vocal. I was kind of triggered a few weeks ago where I don't even remember exactly what I posted. It was something kind of crazy, I'm sure, but then I just put a hashtag of Biden Harris 2020. And I was fascinated because the number of bots and fake accounts has just started like replying and attacking. I was like, wow, this is kind of nuts. And people who were just like saying useless things to the conversation just for the sake of saying something. And then I read something and it was like, we listened to you for your music, not for your political views. Don't push it. And that got me really like mad and annoyed, because I personally feel like this election is incredibly important, because if you are voting for Trump, if you are not voting for Biden, like even if you abstain in voting, if you do not vote for Biden, I feel like you're personally voting against me as a person. My right to exist, my right to be seen as anybody else, for equality, to be against discrimination, racism, whatever it is. That's how it feels. It feels personal to me at this point.
Yeah.
Because so much of the political climate and what the current president has furthered has felt like an attack on so many people.
Yeah.
Even with the coronavirus, like, I don't know if you saw this. I just posted this a few days ago. There was a resolution or something in the House, and it was like, we condemn anti-Asian sentiment. We condemn this. and 164 Republicans voted against it. To which I say, first of all, what? Like, why is it hard to just say it is not okay for you to be a racist person and to like, don't attack innocent Asian people on the street? Like, why is that hard to say? But the fact that this has become a partisan issue and this has become split on party lines is infuriating to me. It makes everything that we're working for as people who create culture, as Asian Americans who have, you know, tried to make a name for themselves in representation, and for everything that we do with K-pop, even all the positive things that we've talked about with K-pop at the beginning of this conversation, instantly feel negated. You know, thankfully that resolution got passed, but the fact that it was not like a almost unanimous, like, yes, we can get behind saying racism is bad, drives me insane. So going back to that point of when I posted that and they're like, don't push it and we like you for your music, not for your political views. I'm like, I feel like my music and the person that I am are all one and the same. You can't choose to be like, I like you just because I like this one song, but I don't like everything else about you. Yeah. Like, I feel like that's very, very selfish, and like that's not how this world works, you know? So that's kind of how I feel with it. It's very weird because I know that it's gonna rub people the wrong way. Even me saying this, like, it's people are gonna say stick to the music, stick to, you know, singing and writing or whatever. But I feel like so much of what's gone on the past 4 years has felt like a personal attack, not just to me, but to almost everybody who is not a white person in America.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's heartbreaking and baffling to me.
And so
yeah.
And so, yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I think people, for some reason, I see this all the time with like Black culture, where they'll like the Black music, they'll like, you know, the athletes, they'll like all the cool vibe and the swag and the clothes, but like they don't want to acknowledge anything Black that has to deal with sort of the injustices of the world. I'm sure it's the same thing for the Asian community. And so it must be so frustrating on one hand to see, you know, all this representation happening with like Crazy Rich Asians, K-pop. And then on the other hand, it's like, oh, but you guys don't have my back when it comes to like some serious real life shit. Like that must be so infuriating. And so I'm wondering if like that maybe that's part of the reason why the K-pop fan base is so strong, is because you guys want to stick together because maybe you feel like in certain ways that like the rest of the world does not have your back. Do you think that that's makes sense, or I don't know.
You know, I would like to think so. I would like to think, and I would like to advocate for that. I think a difficulty though is that K-pop, not difficulty, one of the realities of K-pop and K-pop fandom is that it's so global. Like we have, you know, obviously a big contingency of fans in North America, but also all around the world. You know, from Southeast Asia to Africa to Europe, like every single Latin America, every single continent has such a huge K-pop fandom that it is hard to truly all come together around a singular cause.
Yeah.
The beauty of, I think, the K-pop fandom and also in what I thought was I think is still originally beautiful about America is that it is such a melting pot. It is people coming together in K-pop for really fun, entertaining, beautiful music and production, whereas America is supposed to be a melting pot of cultures and people and political and religious ideologies coming together and living together peacefully. You know, that is kind of what it's supposed to be. And so in that sense, like it is a little, I don't know, I would love to see more of it. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to get people to be more active with it. But it is something that I have thought about for a while, where it's like, what would really mobilize people? But for a lot of people, it's like, this is This is an American problem. And so now what I'm trying to say is like, yes, this is an American issue. But the reality is that American politics and economy affects the world. It is the most influential single nation in the entire world. The United States of America runs foreign policy, and any singular decision affects the entire region and then world geopolitics. And so even if you're in some nation in Southeast Asia, this election will directly impact your country and the economics and everything about it, wherever you are in the world. And I think trying to express that and have people understand that has been a challenge, and also something that I haven't really quite figured out how to do in a way that is true to who I am.
Well, before we get to audience questions, that was a great answer, by the way. This has been like such a wonderfully deep conversation, and I love it. So when I asked I hate saying my fans because that sounds like whatever, but people, my followers, my Instagram followers, for questions, I got a bunch of
fans.
Thank you. I got a bunch of audience questions, but there was one question multiple people asked around this subject. So I want to ask this first before we dive into individual questions. Okay. And one of the comments that kept popping up about K-pop was sort of like the sort of like cultural appropriation that happens with like some groups or some artists, specifically when it comes to like Black culture being, you know, a huge influencer of their music. And so people wanted to know, like, what are your thoughts on that? How do you feel about it? How do you think maybe the industry could sort of reconcile that a little bit? Yeah.
Oh, this is a tricky one. Okay, where do we start with this?
I don't want to get you in trouble.
So I'm going to preface this by saying that I don't know the right answers to this. I don't think I don't think I know the right answers, and I don't want to speak for an entire industry. I can speak to what I have perceived and what I have kind of observed. But again, I feel, and I preface this because I also know that people are going to run with this in ways and try to take things out of context, because I think the internet right now is just living and thriving off cancel culture for the sake of cancel culture. And the only reason that I was like, I will consider like talking about this is because it's with you, because I feel like, and I also, one thing that I've been kind of struggling with is I think issues like this require dialogue and conversation. It requires me and other people to have conversations with people who come from a different background to say, well, what am I missing here? And how can I change my train of thought, or how can I educate myself? But I think that process of education doesn't exist right now. And that's why people just are just quick to cancel. And I've seen that happen to a lot of people where it's like, well, can you tell me about this? And it's like, how do you not know you're canceled? And so having prefaced that, going back to the original question, I think I had a conversation maybe a few months ago where somebody asked me, like, why were Black people getting upset about K-pop using certain fashion styles or hairstyles, or what is cultural appropriation or misappropriation, whatever you want to call it. And I had to sit there and I was like, why am I getting this question? And I realized, like, outside of America, even though American culture and Black culture is so prevalent across the world, people don't have an understanding of American history or politics, right? They do not understand, and I personally also will never be fully able to understand the Black experience, the African American experience. And even though it is so much discussed in culture and politics today, it just doesn't trickle down to or out of the United States, because that is not a political or socioeconomic reality that people in China, in Korea, Japan, and even Europe live with. And so when I had this conversation, what I realized is like when people are taking or borrowing or appropriating, whatever words you want to use, bits and pieces of other cultures, it comes from a place of like, oh, this is cool, this is hip, this is really trendy, and we respect it. And I had to, like, haphazardly, to the best of my ability, explain like why people can get upset about borrowing from another culture.
Mhm.
They're like, oh, but like this is completely out of like, we just think it's so cool.
Yeah.
And we think it's like so hip, and we really just want to emulate that. I think that was where then I had to go into, okay, but this is why it can be an issue, because there's a history of even like music, like so much of music started like that we know today. Popular pop music started and has its roots in Black and African American culture and experience from the 1800s, the 1900s, like the entire thing. And they just had no idea. Like even
Yeah.
I have no real idea. I'm doing my best to educate myself, listen to podcasts, and take bits and pieces from what I can kind of gather. But even like growing up, like I'm not that old, but like in high school or in college, I feel like there could have been such a better process of educating about the past in terms of like
Mhm.
why we are where we are and how we got here. And so to some people, this can just sound like a big overall justification for what it is. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm not trying to qualify it. I think that's just the way that it currently is. There is a disconnect in terms of what is created and where it comes from. What I can say that I don't think any of it comes from a place of malice or bad intention. It's just a big part of like not understanding. Like I've also thought to the point like, okay, how do we resolve this? How do we go about like fixing or like ameliorating this situation? Like, does every label need to have like a cultural expert that they bring in somewhere?
Mhm.
You know, like it's also very weird. And I think K-pop is also at a point where originally K-pop was never really created for international consumption,
Yeah.
right? K-pop means pop is popular music. You just
Mhm.
add a K in front of it. It's Korean popular music.
Yeah.
And so it was made for Korea. It was made for domestic consumption. It just happened to travel really, really well. And so from some people's perspective, they're like, oh, they just love what we do. We just kind of put stuff out and people love it. And I don't think people really fully understand the diversity and the cultural ramifications, positive or negative, that K-pop can have. Any big power can have. So I think we're going through a moment of reconciliation. And I think having these types of discussions and having people kind of ask like, what, like, why, how is this possible? Like, let's talk about it. This is a process of us getting to a point where less people from different cultures and backgrounds can feel better understood or accepted and represented in whatever music. So going back to that conversation that I had, then they're like, oh, like, we get it. Like, I now understand it, having heard the long, almost educational diatribe I went on why it's not okay. They're like, oh, like, had no idea. I had no
Yeah.
clue. I think, you know, as an American perspective, like, we are aware of the hundreds of years of slavery and just like the gross, you know, injustices and everything that has happened. But in Korea or in Asia, they just don't know. Like in Korea was enslaved and colonized by the Japanese till very recently. And that's why Japan and Korea still have really bad relationships. Like, you know, a big part of the issue with comfort women and the Japanese just kind of be like, reparations for what? You know, like we already dealt with that. Like that stuff is also, that's more pressing to Korean people because that is the reality here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation. I think again, it's these discussions that I think will hopefully push the envelope just a little bit more, where we just keep kind of having these conversations. I think the one thing that I do want to say though is like, not just this conversation in general, but I really want for there to be some sort of platform, some sort of safe place where people can have conversations and really learn and take away from other people's experiences and cultural backgrounds. I don't know why that doesn't really exist right now. So yeah, I don't know. Did that answer the question in some way?
No, you did. I think people, everyone is really passionate about the position that they have, and I think a lot of people want to be right. And I think it's just sort of the way that social media has really sort of changed discourse. I think for the worse in this regard is that there isn't sort of having a conversation and learning and then allowing the information to maybe change the way that you think positively. It's sort of like, here's my position. I'm going to yell it at you. I'm going to be right. You're wrong. So as a result, I think there is a lack of people learning because people aren't communicating with each other. Everyone's just shouting at each other. And, I think when it comes to this issue of cultural appropriation, like, I understand why I got so many questions about it because, A, I'm a Black person, and B, there's so many times where I'm like, oh, this thing now, like, even like if you look at Billie Eilish, where people are like, oh, the way that she dresses, like, that's so cool. I'm like, literally every Black R&B singer, Aaliyah, like all the girl groups, like Jade, like Blackstreet, Escape, all of them dress like that, and that wasn't considered cool. They weren't getting, clothes from Gucci gifted to them. So to me, I'm whenever I see like this cultural appropriation conversation happening, I think at the end of the day, what I feel, and I don't speak for all Black people. I just want to preface that. But I do feel on a certain level that Black people just want the sort of the recognition, A, and B, sort of the financial benefit that people who don't look like us, but who sort of dip in and, take the culture and they have that sort of success. Or doors are open to them, or they're more widely accepted, and they can, go about the world wearing baggy clothes. Like Billie Eilish is never gonna get stopped. She's a little white girl.
Yeah.
She's never gonna be like followed in a store. But then a Black person who dresses like that definitely will be. So I think there is that thing of like being profiting off of Black culture without sort of having that relationship to Black culture in a way that feels reciprocal rather than just taking from it. So I think, like you said, we got to keep having these conversations, and people have to be open to like, oh, like you said, oh, I didn't realize that that's what this meant by cultural appropriation when people said that to you, and like they learned something new. So hopefully they'll carry that forward.
It's weird. Like, I feel like I'm playing a quasi ambassador in Korea, and I'm like, I always like, look, I don't even know all the answers either, but this is like, to my best understanding, like what cultural appropriation is, in the same way that if it's also, I mean, oh god, I don't know if I want to get into this. This is like so scary.
Do it.
God.
Do it.
Oh my god.
Do it.
Oh Lord. Okay, how do we get into this without like the internet killing me? There was, oh god. No, let's talk about this offline, have a conversation, and then talk about it later. Because there's so much that I need to unpack from it, where I was like literally watching from the sidelines being like, how is this happening?
Yeah.
Like, where it's, I just don't even know. Like, so many questions. All to say, I feel like countries and cultures outside of the United States have a very, very complicated relationship when it comes to, I'll say it this way. So much of what the world creates right now in terms of culture is directly influenced and impacted by what is created from America, right? Like the movies, the music, whatever. In America, we can have those conversations about appropriation, about race relations. And even now, as we try to have these discussions, it feels like talking to a wall. Even in America, where this is created and where this is the biggest issue, and it should, like, we're still grappling how to deal with it. Now, from an international perspective, I think a lot of people just kind of see America as like this rich place of culture and content and like really cool gadgets and whatever. And that's what they take it for. They take it at face value. You know, there isn't a disclaimer explaining where this person or where this song comes from. Like Cardi B's song right now is the biggest song, but nobody knows what it means. They have no idea what it means. Like in Korea, idols do not talk about like sex or anything, but they're literally dancing the entire thing on all their socials. And I'm like, you guys have no idea what this means. Like it just people don't read into it as much as they could or should. And so again, not like defending it or justifying it, but I think it really just comes from a place of not knowing. And I think there are ways for us to kind of hopefully educate people and to provide cultural context in the way that, even if it's just me or a few people who are around, just to kind of have those conversations. But it's going to take time. I think this entire thing is, you know, just the reality that we have to live with. And if there are allies and there are people who are trying to better educate and better further the right moves, then I think we'll get there at some point. But I know, I agree that right now that the world is kind of in a shit place, and all of this is kind of just, everything just feels like it's blowing up. So
well, that was good. How do you feel? Do you feel like you were able to get through that okay?
I don't know. How did I do? Like, did that make sense?
It did. Like, I mean, it's a tough conversation to have because, like you said, it's history. It's sort of, there's just a lot of emotions that are involved. And, you know, I think that cultural appropriation is something that requires a lot of unpacking. It's not going to be solved with one conversation. But once someone knows what it is, like once you know better, then you do better. And so I think that's like the biggest takeaway that I think for people who are listening to this, who are sort of maybe struggling with this or didn't realize it, and they hear us talking about it, they're like, oh, that's what I was doing. Oh, my bad. I won't do that anymore. So like if that happens, then great. So you did great.
I did. Yay! Oh, yay!
Okay, so I just have a few audience questions. People are very, very excited. So I want to go through. Okay, let me start with this. Okay, this is from Stephanie, Stephanie put her age. People didn't have to put their age. Okay, Stephanie from San Francisco.
Did they put their home address as well and social security number? No, I'm totally kidding. No, it's so cute.
So Stephanie from San Francisco writes, Asia and South Korea are pretty homogenous as a culture, and in my opinion, pretty behind on issues of diversity, whether gender, sexual orientation, or race. Given the global movement that we've seen with George Floyd around racial equity, where do you see South Korea making progress or not on diversity issues? Where do you see K-pop artists as playing a role in representing difference or diversity?
Gosh, these are some heavy questions today. Let's say this. It's hard for me to say because ethnically I'm in the majority here. It doesn't make sense for me to make a fair and just statement on how things are going. I'm sure there are tons of issues of racism and inequality, not just in Korea, just across wherever we go. I think this is something that the world, people just struggle with everywhere because people are just scared of things and people that are other, right? Like And they just have a complete misunderstanding, a gross misunderstanding. I remember when I was in Latin America, people called me Ching Chong and kept calling me Jackie Chan. Like,
what? When was this?
It's like 10 years ago.
Oh
10,
my
12 years ago.
God.
Something like that. Like it's a little longer than that. No, yeah, a little longer. Maybe like 12, 15 years ago, something like that. But
wow.
It's just they've never, again, these questions that we can have about race and race relations, I think, are very important, and they're special because we're American.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have the opportunity and the privilege of living with people who come from such different backgrounds, who look so different and really influence our daily lives in positive ways. When it comes to places that are ethnically homogenous or places that don't have that, are just very, I guess in this case, in this question, Asian, like people will still stare at like white people or black people. And the presence here for a lot of foreigners historically is that they're military. And, even when I got here, if I was from America, the natural conversation was like, oh, you're American. That means you're part of the American military base. We hate them because they cause all these issues in the military area. There's always an assault, or there's a rape, or there is a sexual whatever, like stuff like that. And this is not having to do with race. This has to do with like country now, So it's the other thing to consider is that for a lot of these Asian countries or around the world, they were colonized. They were taken over. They were occupied by quote unquote American or other forces. And so it's not just a race issue, it's a historical socio issue that has so much to unpack. And I don't think that it's like a direct thing of like, oh, that person's black or white or Latino, so we don't like them. I think people have their prejudices and their biases from what they've learned or what they've experienced in the history of their countries. And that's the only context in which they know things. Again, not justifying any racial acts or anything, because I've seen it and I feel horrible for it. And I'm the type that has to have a conversation about it usually, even recently there was, I don't know if I was playing like a savior complex, and I hope I wasn't, but I remember I was out one night. There were three, I want to say there were two African women and a baby. They were in like traditional garments from I don't know what nation. Obviously, I did not have a conversation with them, but they were trying to get a cab forever. And all these cabs were stopping, and they would not stop for them. And so I had to stop a cab, pretend like I was getting in, open the door for them. And I felt really bad I felt so like it just sucks. And I think it's just a general thing of like people, I don't know, it's just misunderstanding and just ignorance. And I think, again, when it comes to the role that K-pop can play, I think it's, again, hard because K-pop idols have not had that experience. They've probably, most of them have, to be very blunt, unless they've been on tour in the States and you were a fan in the front row and they happened to reach out and touch your hand, they've probably never met a Latino, Latinx, black person, whatever. Like, it's just, the opportunity's not there.
Yeah.
And even if through the internet it may feel like we all live together in one world, we physically live in such different places. So it's a very tricky place. Yeah, I don't know.
You know what? Some of these questions, there's no like answer that's going to sum it all up because life is messy and complicated.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. So, this is interesting. Okay. So it's kind of like sort of touched on what we talked about earlier. This is from Melinda in Boston. Melinda also put her age.
Do these people usually put their age?
No, this is the first episode where people are just like, this is my age. And I kind of love it. Okay, so Melinda writes, there's wide perceptions of K-pop being manufactured, and trainees go through rigorous training periods before they can debut. Debut.
Debut. Whatever floats your boat.
And sometimes the general public believes the part about the inauthenticity.
You got it. You're right there. You're so close. You just needed one more syllable.
Yeah, but should I start this question?
Inauthenticity.
Yeah,
no, I think it sounds great the way it is. Uh-huh.
I'm tired. You got me up late over here. Okay.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay. And sometimes the general public believes the part about the inauthenticity of it. So, do you think companies will begin to allow more freedom and autonomy for artists to write their own music and chart their own paths?
I mean, I think it really depends on is it a singer-songwriter or is it an idol? When I think the general trend and the shift is to allow a lot of idol groups to write their stuff. But also, you guys, it has to be good. Like that's like the main point. Like, if it's a good song, if it's a great song, they're gonna put it out. Like, they're gonna put it out and they're gonna back it. But if it's not at the caliber that it needs to be, then if I was a label, I would second guess it too. Like, I think end of the day, there are songwriters, producers who are seasoned professionals in it for a reason, because they know exactly what they're doing. I would not trust a non-medical person. Well, no, actually, this is a bad example, and that's not going to go there. I was going to be like, to do surgery on me, but I was like, this has nothing to do with music because music is completely subjective. Bad example. But, I think people will get there if they can. Like, I look at groups like 17. They started really early, but one of the members, he is an incredibly talented songwriter. And so he's allowed to do it. BTS, they write a lot of their own stuff too. Monsta X, they write so it's not like it's not there. I think the general media Western perception is that like everything is like industrialized as a factory. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that I can say to that is like, you guys literally try imagining like trying to produce 13 teenage boys who are hormonal as hell into being a singular unit. That singular unit is what provides the ability to choreograph and to dance and perform the way that K-pop does. If you say, oh, well, then like we don't want that, then you can go for your singer-songwriters. Like, you have the option to choose. But I think the other thing to realize from a label perspective is like putting these teams together costs millions and millions and millions of dollars. And to just be able to say, oh, we're going to let him write even though he's never written a song in his life. And he's 14, so he doesn't have the life experiences to really put together a great lyrically strong song. I don't know. That in itself seems like almost a disservice to the kid who doesn't know what he's doing. That's how I feel.
Bam. Take that, Melinda. No, just kidding.
Love you, Melinda.
Okay. This one is also, I think this is from the same Stephanie. Stephanie, you getting 2 questions this episode. That I've never done that.
Stephanie should be honored.
I know, right? Okay, so Stephanie's back and she writes, what criteria do you use to choose which causes or issues to put your platform behind? Like, I know you have done some golden open stuff for Asian American movies, but do you ever consider how controversial something might be as to how you choose where to place your advocacy? That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I definitely try to do as much research as I can and try to understand the ramifications of what my voice means to a cause. And I think it's really case by case basis. I've literally had in this time period of coronavirus, like 6 different organizations reached out to be like, can you be our spokesperson? Can you do this? And I can. I think it's just a matter of, at one point, does it become like the dude's doing too much and he's just throwing his name on anything? Like, that lessens impact. And second, it's like, which one of those causes really means a lot? I also think like it's great that there's a diversity in different organizations that are working for similar causes. So even with like children, there's like compassion, or there's child fun, or there's like so many different things. Like I try to be part of projects where and when it feels natural, and I don't force it. But then I don't know. I also kind of feel like there's so many issues in the world, like so many, that having my hand in a few that are kind of different but also meaningful to me are just great. When it comes to like what is your most personal issue, I don't know. I think obviously there's no issue that is more or less important. I feel like everything in terms of struggle and in terms of humanitarian aid is all relative to the people who are going through it. It's all difficult for everybody who's going through a certain difficulty. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
You gotta stop doing this to yourself. You always give an answer and then you're like, I don't know.
Because I realize that as I answer things, I process them in my head, and then I'm like, so I pretty much had like a fluid train of thought, and I know my brain just bounces everywhere. So I'm like, I don't know. I hope I got my message across.
I think you did. I mean, I think that that's important for anyone who's listening and wants to get more into being an advocate and, sort of getting behind causes. It's like you said, just choose the things, like maybe 2 or 3 things that are really passionate, that you just have a natural passion for, and then just lean into that, and then you'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Word. Well,
Eric.
Yeah.
Time is up.
Oh, no. No.
This has been so great.
It has been fun. It has been a journey. It has been a journey. It was a heavy morning breakfast for me here in Korea.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's all good. Honestly, like, I'm glad we were able to do this, and thank you for inviting me. I think it's I was very nervous because you just don't know with the internet. You just don't know what people are going to do. But I think the stuff that we discussed today is important, and it's through starting dialogue and conversations that we can further appreciate and understand other people's points of view. So I'm glad we did it. Thank you. Bye.
Yes. Okay, babe. Eric is everything.
He has such a soothing voice. Like, that's a good voice to listen to. Like a big cup of tea that you just keep sipping on.
Does everything come back to tea to you?
Oh, yeah, pretty much. Yep.
What would you do if
Yorkshire tea had never been invented?
Yes.
Oh my God, I'd have to switch to PG tips.
I mean, they both taste like shit, if you want to be honest. And I know that's controversial.
The worst one is Twining's English breakfast tea. That shit should not call itself English breakfast tea for a start.
I thought it was Twinings. It's Twinings?
Is it Twinning? No, it's got to be Twining, surely.
Because it's the word twin and then Nings.
I always pronounce it Twinings.
I mean, that sounds better than like, excuse me, can I have a cup of Twinnings?
Oh, look, there's some twins over there. They're twinning.
Okay, excuse me for being an uncouth American. I will work on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A pleasure.
And as you guys know, we are not taking one motherfucking cent from any of these corporations out here. Okay?
Amazon, looking at you.
Yeah, no Amazon, no to Ritz crackers.
What did Ritz crackers ever do to you? They're delightful. I love a good Ritz cracker.
No to Angel Soft toilet paper 3-ply. I don't think so.
Only 1 ply for this household. Life's not worth living unless you have a surprise when you wipe.
If it doesn't fall apart like a Chipotle burrito, I don't want your toilet paper. But I like to support Black-owned businesses, you guys. And so today,
It's gonna be the day.
that I'm gonna throw it back to you.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. You just said
By
it.
now, you should have somehow figured out what you got to do. I don't.
Okay, we don't need to carry on. Like it was just the one line.
So maybe. You guys, this is falling apart. Are you still listening? Okay.
Are you still on the toilet paper?
Okay. Bake Off, this is serious.
Okay.
No more jokes
None.
ever again on this podcast. Okay, seriously, you guys, I want to support this Black-owned business. If you are looking at me now, look at this cute abstract sweat. It's from this company called Sook and Sepia. And they're so cute. It's like black. It's okay. So they're just like, they're Black-owned. They make really cute clothes, like anything from like casual to dressing up to accessories to motherfucking boots.
Ooh.
It's going to be winter soon. I know we're all going to be inside.
No one's saying you can't wear boots inside.
Yeah, wear boots inside. An Anky B? Why not? That's an ankle boot. But Anky B is cute. Anyway, Sook and Sepia is so good. I love them so much. You can follow them on Instagram.
Link is in the description below.
You go to their website, sookandsepia.com. Follow them on Instagram. It's S as in
Sook
subpoena.
and Sepia.
Yes, it's S as in Sook and Sepia. No. S as in subpoena. O as in ovulation. U as in unicycle. K as in K-drama, like Korean dramas. A as in ampersand. N as in nature. D as in divot.
Going golfing, I see.
Okay, S as in supple. E as in eclair. P as in prolific. I as in idiotic. And A as in aviation.
We need to stop coming up with themes to make this more difficult for you. You should do it off the theme of the episode next time.
So wait, so
Everything's K-pop related.
oh gosh.
Yeah, there we go. Credit time!
Host Phoebe Lynn Robinson. Producers Phoebe Lynn Robinson and British Baekoff. Editor British Baekoff. Theme music Gavin Turek. Interns Sasha and Malia Obama.
But they're not.
But they could be.
But they're not.
Is the Better Business Bureau checking to see who?
Are you claiming them on your tax returns?